The world is full of interesting people with wisdom and extraordinary experiences to learn from. Join me on a journey to discover them, speak with them, and learn from them. I'm Adrian Sinclair, host of A Podcast with Interesting People at apodcast.com. Welcome, friends, to A Podcast with Interesting People. Today, my guest is Shubhendu Sharma, a TED Fellow, and a guy with whom we're going to be talking about how is it possible to grow a forest like this. So turning what you see on the left-hand side. So for those who are listening to this podcast, it's literally just planters in, nothing green, just planters in the soil. And 1 year later, there's a mini high-density forest, taller than a man by far. And my guest Shubhendu Sharma is gonna tell us the secrets behind this magical technology. How did you accomplish this? How did you make this happen?
Hi, Adrian. So the method we use to make these forests is called Miyawaki method of afforestation, which basically brings back a forest which would have existed at that particular place a few thousand years ago. So we go to the history of the place, we go to the last remains of a natural forest and identify the species which are native to that place. So they would have evolved for millions of years at that particular place, which also means that they don't have to be treated any special compared to the kind of trees which we plant, which need a lot of maintenance. So because they have adapted to that particular place so very well, and there's a whole lot of things we have to put in place. But what happens that in a harmony, these trees support each other and they happen to grow into 100-year-old. It looks like 100-year-old forest in just 10 years.
That's amazing. Just looking at this picture over here, I'm just going to pull it up again once more so people can appreciate this. How what's happening on the left-hand side, and then on the right-hand side, it's just astounding. People tend to think that this it would take many years to grow this, and this is from July 2018 to July 2019, literally from just ground up to a high density. It's not only that those trees are tall, but they're like very high density, which is amazing. And so the first thing that I got is special kind of species that you found that are they just more resilient? Why are they growing so fast?
So the reason why they're growing so fast is because, okay, let's start from the beginning. When you find out the potential natural vegetation of a particular place, you find out the right combination in which the trees can grow. So every place has a potential, like Earth as a living organism has a potential to just regrow whatever has been lost. Like if I cut my hair, they will regrow. If I bruise my skin, slowly, a white color skin will come up. I mean, the blood will get clotted, and then white skin, then skin with pigment, skin with hair, and eventually it will start to look like as if nothing happened. It may take maybe 5, 6, 7 years, but that's the gradual process how our body recovers. Similarly, Earth also has the ability to regrow the lost vegetation it would have lost because of human intervention. Now, the species of this vegetation is collectively called as the potential natural vegetation of that particular place. And if you are able to identify potential natural vegetation and segregate the species which would eventually, in long run, which would eventually will become the stable forest of that particular place. Because if you deprive land from all the vegetation and remove everything, and then barricade it, deprive it from any human intervention, from cattle grazing, from people walking on it, people trying to water it or take water from it. You just deprive it from human intervention. The first thing which is going to grow on that land is grass. So the grasses will grow, and then some shrubs will grow, then small trees will start to grow. And eventually it will start to grow trees which have ability to grow under the shade of bigger trees. These trees are called shade tolerant trees. They grow very slowly, but their wood is strong enough to withstand the tsunamis, earthquakes, cyclones, floods. And that's why this community of trees is also known as climax forest. Because once the climax forest is established, it keeps regenerating itself again and again. There is no next stage of vegetation after reaching the climax stage, climax forest. So if you're able to identify the climax forest species from the bigger pool of potential natural vegetation of that particular place, you will be able to reach that last stage of succession, which otherwise would take 150 to 200 years. And what's the advantage? The advantage is that you take a huge leap and reach the last stage right on day one. And when you plant these trees in a combination where you prepare the soil so that it can absorb the moisture, you give them enough nutrition, you keep the soil covered just like it happens in a natural forest, the soil is always covered. You give them that tiny ecosystem, the microclimate is as healthy and fertile as a natural forest. These trees tend to grow much faster than if they would have been planted independently. But at the same time, I don't think that they are growing faster than their natural growth rate. They are growing at the maximum growth which a species can achieve if everything around it is optimized to achieve that high growth. So we plant these trees at a very high density. They support each other with all the fungal networks. Their roots get entangled and they grow as a community, which otherwise doesn't happen when you look at plantations or gardens or avenue trees. We try to segregate them and put them in a condition which is not the natural habitat of these trees.
So is part of the strategy to bolster their growth and the rate at which they're growing? Which I understand you're saying that they're growing at their own natural rate, but it just seems that it's happening so fast because they are mixed different types of trees, and that they have everything that they need in order to grow, and also that high density. Is that high density one of the supporting factors why they grow so fast?
Yes. So if you go to a natural forest, every square meter you will find 900 seeds fallen on the forest floor. 900 active seeds which can grow into a seedling. They may even grow into a seedling, but out of these 900 seedlings, only 3 to 5 will get a chance to become a tree. So what we do is we plant 3 to 5 seedlings per square meter, expect 100% survival, so that we can match the density of a natural forest. Now, one may think, how are the trees going to develop to their full size if you plant them so close to each other? And we have to realize that in a natural forest, not every single tree has grown to its fullest. There will be 1-year-old trees of same species, there will be 12 years old, there will be 120 years old, there will be a 2000-year-old tree of the same species. We have to have all the sizes of every single species in a forest in order to make it a forest. It's not a garden or a plantation or an orchard where the trees are spaced out so that they can grow to their fullest and we can harvest fruits from them. So the first thing we have to start imagining is we are creating a forest which is a combination of different types of species and different age groups in the same species. You can't make a family with just adults. You have to have the old people, the younger children, uh, the potential of you have to have enough seeds on the ground on the forest floor, which has the potential to grow into a seedling and fill up the empty space of the canopy if a bigger tree dies at natural death. And this is how the forest regenerates itself. So we have to regenerate that entire ecosystem where you have multi layers. You have a layer of ground where there are seeds and seedlings. You have to have a layer of shrubs. You have to have a layer of small trees, then big trees, and then canopy trees. And it could be the same species present in all different layers. Then you make.
Really? Wow, I didn't realize that they could be even the same species but at different stages. That's very interesting. How do you guys prepare the soil? Like looking at this over here, this picture, you see how what additional steps did you guys do? I mean, the picture shows a bunch of seedlings and different heights of planted trees, but like they're like still seedlings, I guess, babies, saplings, and how do you have a special method to prepare the soil to give them what they need?
In order to make a forest, you have to create a forest-like environment for the seedlings which you're planting. So let's think about what is forest-like environment. A forest-like environment is full of microorganisms at the ground level. When you walk in a forest, and if you take handful of forest soil, just try to see what's there in that soil. There will be ants, there will be termites, there will be things which you can identify only with the help of a microscope, but they're there.
Oops.
Earthworms. How do we make our barren land so good that all of these termites, ants, earthworms, microorganisms are attracted towards it so that they can eventually help the plants we are planting? In order to do that, we have to think, what do they eat? What do these microorganisms, what is their natural habitat? So for microbial life, there are few things which are essential. One is moisture. Like we are totally dependent on water. We won't be able to survive without water because our bodies are up to 75% water. Similarly,
Right.
microorganisms are also up to 75-80% water. And we have to make enough arrangements of moisture retention in our soil so that the earthworms are attracted towards it. They can survive in this soil. They should be able to dig through it. They should be able to digest this moist soil. So, how do we make sure that our soil retains moisture? We provide, we mix some what biomass which is spongy in nature, which can absorb water and retain it. There are soils which are so hard that even when you pour water on it, it won't seep in. It will just stay on the surface and evaporate because of sun. So we have to provide some biomass, mix it in the soil, which can make soil become more porous. Like, when you pour water on sand, it just vanishes, it just goes through. But sand can't hold water. So if you have sandy soil, we make some biomass which can absorb the water like a sponge and retain it, like peat or bagasse of sugarcane. So sugarcane in its original form holds a lot of juice, means in its shredded bagasse form, it can hold a lot of water. Similarly, we mix husk of different types of crops so that we can open up the soil, we can loosen it so that if soil is clay, very strong, water is not able to go in. We open it up, and now when we pour water, water goes in. And then, we have different things like sometimes we even artificially introduce microorganisms to the soil. We brew them in form of a compost tea and artificially introduce them to the soil. But basically, we need to have soil which is soft, which can retain water, which can support biodiversity, and we do it up to a depth of 1 meter. So we dig the soil up to 3.5 feet. mix all these different types of biomass and microorganisms, manure, so that it becomes as healthy and fertile as soil of a natural forest. And
Wow,
then there is one more step after plantation, but let's hear from you, and then I'll tell you more about it.
that's quite an undertaking to dig, 3.5 feet or 3 feet into the surface level in order to make that happen. That's quite a lot, but I understand the mechanics of it. Essentially you're like you said in your own words, you're replicating the natural sort of habitat that you see forests thrive in. You need to replicate that in order to make a thriving. I mean, that's just purely logical. So it's interesting. Why is it not done more? Maybe it's cost of doing it. But my question for you right now is, how did you get to do what you do right now? How did you start? What was that? What's the history of you getting into this? Are you trained? Have you trained for this? For a specific, what's the word for people who are dealing with forests? Arborealists or something like that?
Forester, arborist, gardener, planters, hippies. I don't know.
So how did you get on this path?
Well, I studied industrial engineering, and I used to work for Toyota college. I started work at Toyota as a production engineer. Uh, that's also when I happened to meet this scientist who came to our factory on invitation of Toyota India, where we wanted to become carbon neutral. We wanted to absorb all the pollution, all the CO2 emissions the factory was making at that point of time. And this scientist visited us. We had a large campus, and he, suggested that you have to plant a big forest. So Dr. Akira Miyawaki, who is Professor Emeritus of Yokohama National University, Japan, he has invented a methodology back in 70s where you can actually bring back a lost forest of native trees in a small period of time, maybe just 10 years. And in 10 years, it starts to look like a very dense natural forest, as if it's 100 years old. So I happened to attend one of the lectures on his initial visit. And that's when kind of the germ of the idea that this is something which I was really moved just looking at the pictures of his work in Japan and Thailand, Malaysia. So I joined his team as a volunteer, learned the methodology, and in 1.5 years of seeing that forest growing, the interest grew. I started studying. I studied various afforestation methodology, not just Miyawaki method, but I kind of came to a conclusion that this is by far the most effective and the fastest way to bring back a lost forest. So I documented the methodology. I wrote step-by-step instructions of making these forests, kind of a SOP, standard operating procedure. And I took the SOP to my own house, like the house in which I grew. So we had some land in the backyard of that house, and with help of my parents and family, we planted a tiny patch of forest in the backyard of my own house. And immediately after planting that, like 2 months after planting that, I was already planning about it. I launched the company, which would become a service provider to make forests anywhere and everywhere. So when I decided that I have to start and I have to plant these forests professionally, but probably somewhere, I don't know, maybe the idea came when I met Dr. Miyawaki for the first time, or maybe while I was volunteering on the project. But while I was working at Toyota, I registered the website, made the brand, made a presentation. Like all the startup work was parallelly happening while I was working there. So I was determined that sooner or later I'm going to do this.
So, in a way, the idea of growing these high density forests was germinated by this Japanese I don't know, professor, specialist, arborealist, I don't know,
Scientist.
scientist. And your first forest in your backyard, was it a success, or did you improve on your I guess initial approach to doing this?
Well, it was a success because it we could show that before and after transition, and number of birds started come. Like the first hornbill I saw in my life was in the backyard of my own house in the forest which I made. So that I believe is a great achievement. So it is a success, but we made a lot of mistakes in planting that patch of forest. We planted some non-native trees also because the name sounded so Indian that we just planted them assuming that they are native trees. And that also exposed me to a bigger problem that nobody knows what, like not many people care about the origin of species, where these trees come from, and we are doing whatever is in fashion. We are forgetting our natural forest, how they used to look like, what are our native trees, what are the birds that are visiting these native trees. So suddenly, the whole encyclopedia of this natural world opened up because we made those mistakes in our initial projects. Only to realize that India is one of the most biodiverse countries in the world. We have more than 50% of biodiversity of Southeast Asia in the state, South Asia, in the state where I planted my first forest in state of Uttarakhand. So you can imagine, I am sitting on such a huge pool of biodiversity, but we are still planting species which are non-native. Means ignoring this huge pool of biodiversity, we are bringing South American species planting them. And this is much bigger of a challenge because this will need a mindset shift. This will need a mindset shift from the modern approach of making things green or landscaping and take us back to a few thousand years when we didn't have lawns or gardens in a country like India. We had only tiny forests. Like we don't have a word for lawn in our original Indian languages. We don't.
You don't
So
have a word for what?
we don't have a word for a grass lawn.
Oh, grass lawn. Okay, because the audio cut out for a second. Grass lawn. That's so funny. Um, as you were saying and telling your journey, I was thinking about like how you introduce yourself when you are networking with someone or talking to someone new who you meet, and they ask you like, "Hey, so I am I don't know, I'm an engineer and I do this and that. What do you do?" And you and your response could be,
I
"Well,
say I make forests.
I make forests, and I made forests in my backyard. What did you do?"
Yeah. So, including on my Twitter profile, I've just written I make forests. Yeah.
I make forests. That's brilliant. I love it. I love it. I love it. Um, so, one of the things that got me so interested in this is that, I'm currently living in Utah, which I love this state. It's a beautiful state. The elevation is a little bit higher, as you know. Like it's beautiful places. It's a great place to ski, snowboard, and outdoors hiking and everything. However, there are the parks over here, and obviously there's growing population, and as the population grows, the state has more and more issues with water, and water is primarily collected from the mountaintops. The snow collection as it collects and later on melts, and during spring and summer, and all that water comes down. And in part, I'm hoping that what you're doing could become, in a way, I don't know. I don't want to call it a fad, but maybe a new thing. Instead of growing grass in your backyard, people should start growing tiny little forests, because I believe that with the root system and everything, the water retention issues could be probably helped. One of the things with grasses, they have very short roots, and so that water doesn't get retained. And obviously, places that have more trees are healthier places, because those roots can penetrate deeper, and that whole ecology can happen more readily, versus these manicured lawns that are just sprayed with fertilizer constantly in order to sustain them, because otherwise they wouldn't be able to survive. So the soil over here, and I'm actually going to have a soil expert next week, where I'm going to be talking about this as well. So this is kind of all coalescing. So I'm building up. This is my 101 with forests, and then I want to talk about 101 of soils. Tell me, in what places around the world were you successful with the method that you're evolving, and what places do you think that this could be done everywhere? Do you think we could adopt some of this in Utah over here and be successful growing forests over here? Share some of your stories on that.
Cool. So the most successful projects came from most difficult places. We have a desert in India, in an Indian state called Rajasthan. Uh, they have extremely scanty rainfall, and the soil is absolute dead. It's just like dust which can blow up in the air. Uh, there is no soil microbiology. It looks barren the moment you look at it. And because they have not seen any trees for last 2-3 generations at least, nobody believed in us when we started the project. And the locals used to say that uh, nothing will survive because the termites are going to eat up anything. And the reason why there were so many termites in the soil was because whatever the tiny amount of vegetation they get, uh, that's there for all the termites. So it was such a big challenge, and we planted the forest. What we saw was that it was extremely. It felt like as if the land was waiting for all these species to come back, and it was in a hurry to just grow them so rapidly. Within a year, we achieved results which we didn't find even in rainy places. The beauty of native species is that they will thrive with whatever is the local rainfall at that particular place. So if it is a desert, we don't have to water them much because they would have adapted to grow in the scantiest rainfall which that place gets. And we just saw this extraordinary growth. We saw, in middle of the desert, piece of land getting converted into a lush green forest. And the termite issue which was there, and there was some university professor who came up with some poison and tried to get rid of these termites, but they just moved from one area to the other, which was applied by the termite side. I don't know what to call it, but what we realized was that this is the ecosystem of that particular place. So if termites are eating some biomass, let them eat it. It eventually capped at some volume, and then there were our trees kept thriving while there were termites in the soil. I mean, that project was one of the most successful projects. Then we did a project in a cold desert, which didn't do very well. I mean, we just experimented last year, so it's still on. I mean, we are still learning and trying to write a process for that particular place. In Iran, we have done very successful work. Temperature differences were like -17 to +50,
Oh.
and still the forest is thriving. Netherlands is a huge case study where we made one forest in 2015. It has expanded to 100 forests all over the country. They're distributed in a way that in Holland you are never more than 15 to 20 kilometers away from a tiny forest that we have planted.
That's amazing. That's truly amazing. I'm hoping that whoever's listening to this and the audience as they're going to be sharing this is going to inspire them that this is possible to do almost anywhere in even very extreme areas. Certainly over here in Utah, there are parks which are protected, and they, they are there's a lot of trees over there. But I think it would be so cool if people would adapt this idea of planting a forest in their backyards and let that happen instead of mowing the lawn all the time and having to deal with that.
Yeah.
Although I can see that in some places people just want to have a flat thing and not like tall trees. But the state also is struggling a little bit with pollution, and having more trees obviously would help with that aspect as well, filtering all of that stuff. So it's definitely a worthwhile pursuit. In places where you were successful, how did the local population react to it? I know that some of them didn't believe that you could do it. What happened after, those 12 months or 18 months when this forest just exploded and people were like, what in the world is happening here? What kind of voodoo tricks did you use over here to make this happen? And why is this successful? And did they take this to the next level? Did they continued on what you started, and how did you kind of encourage it in the first place so that they would take this on and continue?
Well, so Netherlands is a classic example because when I went there for the first time, they were very skeptical. I mean, Holland is considered the mecca for all the landscape architects. They sell trees all over Europe. They are famous for their gardening practices, the tulips, and whatnot. So I faced a lot of reluctance during the initial meetings when we were kind of pitching this idea to one of the municipalities, and we were criticized. And one experiment they did was they said, okay, we are also going to plant one tiny patch of forest with our methodology so that we can compare. And they planted that patch of forest just next to our 200 square meters. So it's like two tennis courts size of area. One is planted using our method, one is planted using their method. And we plant very small saplings, just 60 centimeters to 80 centimeters. And they planted trees which were more than three and a half, more than 10 feet tall, sometimes like 5 feet, 8 feet, 10 feet. The age was of those trees they were already 3+ years old. So it wasn't a fair race, but eventually what happened, within a year, our forest almost grew double of the height of that patch which they planted in comparison to our patch. And Wageningen University of the Netherlands, they did a research project, a 1 year long research project on monitoring the growth in biodiversity in our forest and in the other patch. So people got so excited, and the university report came out, and as a conclusion, they concluded that our patch of tiny forest attracts much more biodiversity even compared to patch of a natural forest in vicinity of that particular place. And the reason why our forest had so much biodiversity was because it was so dense that you couldn't even walk into it. And that was a very crucial boost for for the animals to come and make this place as their habitat, because they'll be hidden from the predators. There won't be any human intervention, so there is no disturbance. So this became the lodging, the mating ground for a lot of birds, butterflies, bees, insects, even small mammals like hare. So because of that success story, they made a 10 minutes long documentary film on it. They showed it at multiple places, especially to the municipalities. So because of the excitement it generated because of the race of these two patches of forest. Eventually, they won 1.8 million euros award from the government to plant 100 such forests all over Holland. And that I feel is the best way to promote and propagate this methodology at any new geography. You show and tell, you create excitement about it by providing enough scientific backing from a reputed university like Wageningen, and then promote it by video and try to get everybody involved. So now I don't have to go to Holland to plant these forests. We shared the methodology. We created master trainers. We trained 17 people in that organization, and they are continuing to make these forests by themselves.
So let me take you in a different direction right now. In 2016, and I'm just going to put this up on the screen over here, you did a TED Talk, how to grow a forest in your backyard, and which is phenomenal. A lot of phenomenal information in it, and of course, beautifully delivered by you. How did your engagement with TED and delivering this change how you're doing? Has that accelerated? Was it just like, oh, it's great that somebody's doing it, or did you get good connections with someone to propagate your mission, to start these, to propagate reforesting the planet?
Yeah, so I became a TED Fellow in 2014, and the program is that they choose 20 people from all over the world who are doing something worth spreading, which is TED's mission, ideas worth spreading. I gave a TED Talk in 2014. 2016 was the TED Talk which is less of an introductory talk where I would present my idea for the first time, but I wanted to share how exactly we go about making these forests. And this talk resulted in something phenomenally huge, which is that the idea of imagination of forest from a place far away from our city where wild animals live together, something which only government has to do, something which is great but not imagined in urban areas. All those notions were kind of left behind, and a new strategy or a new thinking was introduced, that you can make a forest in your backyard, you can make it in public spaces, you can make it in schools, and you can do it. I think that was something which made people realize that it's not that difficult either. And it was supplemented by our open source documentation. A lot of people came to our website after watching the TED Talk, downloaded the methodology, started making forests in their own places, and also translated our documentation. So somebody just translated the documentation and sent us a link, that I just translated it into French, in Japanese, in Bengali. And this beautiful movement of people coming together, if they're not making a forest, at least they're helping somebody make a forest by translating it in the other language. That I feel is extremely powerful, and that is the power which a platform like TED brings to you, where overnight you can reach millions of people. This TED Talk has more than 2 million views, and if not for TED, probably I wouldn't have taken my point so technically, sharply, to such a wide audience, to serious wide audience, because you can do something beyond TV, but people watch TV all the time and they forget about it. I have seen people taking action because of TED, or watching the TED Talk and getting into a conversation where it even generated us leads, business leads, where like the Holland project came because of TED. it also gives us a big, uh, like people started taking us seriously. Before that, we could have been clubbed with somebody who just plant trees. But now we have the world outside have some appreciation towards our focus on the technique, focus on religiously following the methodology, focus on maintaining the standards, maintaining the quality. Just like industry makes industrial goods, Apple make iPhones, Toyota makes cars, we make forests, but with the same industrial acumen with which any of these businesses do their work.
So you mentioned open source and open sourcing your methodology. How is your company then thriving and making this still a business if you pretty much like here's the secrets? So how do you turn that into a successful business?
Well, I mean, contrary to popular opinion, this has actually helped us make more money. And I'll tell you how. The day we went open source was the same day when we stopped negotiating on our pricing. Because we provide services, we provide consulting services, we provide contractual services. The moment somebody tries to negotiate with us, we say you either pay us what we are asking or take it away for free. The quality won't be different if you do it by yourself versus if you ask us to do it. There's absolutely no question about difference because this is the same documentation which we will be using in the field when we make a forest for you. The same documentation is available for free. So if you really want to save your money, do it by yourself. This is the link. We won't give you the hard copy because we don't want to do that, but link is there for everybody. So when people look at this approach, they also appreciate your values where you respectfully charge for your time. And I feel that what money we charge is at par with the industrial rates of technical consulting. You hire a IT consultant, you would pay them the same amount you are paying to us as afforestation consultants. So this also brings us on the same mainstream platform, which otherwise is very difficult for uh, companies which are working purely for sake of environment, purely for sake of trees, or the non-profits working purely for sake of environment and trees. It also gives us it also reduces our pipeline to serious inquiries. Anybody who is not willing to pay us would have already taken the methodology without telling us they would have made a forest. Sometimes I receive pictures from people who have made forests, and now that it has grown maybe 1 year, 1.5 years old, then they would send us the picture. So we won't even know if somebody who's not willing to pay us is already using our method and making a forest, which is great. Those serious people, I mean, we have open source not just our methodology but also our pricing quotation. So people can go to our website and see how much they have to pay us if they have to work with us. So it has only helped us get more and more serious inquiries. The prospective clients appreciate that they are getting the same rate which they would be getting anybody else would get. So we are not doing selective pricing depending on the clients. Big companies are worried about their size because they feel that their vendors are going to overcharge them, thinking that XYZ multinational big companies anyways can pay, so let me charge the big multinational companies much more than what I would charge public in general. Here we have kind of got rid of all those notions, put our quotation on our website, put our methodology on the website. It's helping people, helping large corporations, helping our prospective clients to understand our technique better. And they also appreciate the attention to detail which we have in all our SOPs. And they can always cross check if we don't deliver on site. What we are promising in our SOPs is the right methodology. So this is also a way of self-scrutinizing the quality, the quality and the focus on execution, where we hand over the entire SOPs to our prospective clients who can always cross-verify whether we are doing things the right way or not. So it has improved, going open source has improved our quality, has improved our revenues, has improved the focus of the company and of our sales team, because it has segregated the people who are willing to pay versus people who are not willing to pay at all. And also, it has helped us develop an industry. There are few more competitors, come partners now, who are using our methodology, but they are also helping us develop the supply chain, which probably just one company like Forest may not be able to give that type of financial assurance to the suppliers. But now that we have competition, come partners, we have 10 different companies who are giving our suppliers enough demand that they can bring the price down, they can focus on expanding and invest in the infrastructure which you need to run the large operation of converting barren patches of land into forests. Because the problem we are trying to solve is so huge, millions, probably billion hectares. I don't know how many hectares,
Right.
but
Right.
yeah.
Now it's a it always tickles me. I'm always thrilled to hear um, when open source thrives, and I do understand on the one end some aspects when some companies are trying to protect intellectual property, and they put in a lot of effort into something, and it costs a lot of money, and then if someone just comes in and takes it and runs with it, then it's almost like an unfair advantage. But there are open source projects, both software and hardware, and now real life. I don't know what do you call your open source? Open source trees?
Uh, I don't know. We call it. We just have a Dropbox link on our website, and you can
Open.
just click on it
Oh,
and download
well, it
the
could be like open source ecology, which is what Marcin is doing with his stuff, but that's actually open source hardware. But yeah, the
Yeah,
point
but
is that
they were actually our inspiration to go open source altogether.
really,
Previously, Previously, we were little reluctant because we were just sharing our technique with our paying clients. So what we would do is we would go to their projects as a consultant. We would handhold them for a initial few hundred square meters. We would hand over the manuals and we would come back, thinking that if we are lucky, maybe our clients won't share this manual with their friends. But then we suddenly realized that if our mission is to bring back the entire lost forest, why are we restricting our techniques to make it happen? So if somebody else is also planting a forest, they are actually help us move one step ahead in our mission. So uh, we would be not helping our mission. We would have been hypocrites by saying we want to bring back the entire lost forest. It's less of a business, more of a social enterprise. But at the same time, we have a premium on our methodology. It's not for everybody. It's exclusive. And then when I saw Marcin's TED talk and later on worked with him and made a forest at the factory farm in Maysville, Missouri, that was actually our first project outside India. So Marcin
really,
has been, yeah, a
that is
great
amazing.
inspiration. He took us international. Yeah.
That's amazing. So for those listeners who are not familiar, Google, and we're going to put it in show notes as well, the link to open source ecology. If you just go to opensourceecology.org, that's and there was a TED talk that Marcin has done with respect to open source hardware. So how, if we would open source all the hardware, and if you want to build a tractor, you can build a tractor. Here are the plans, and you can do it. And so I met with him as well. I went to Missouri, and I did I did one of his workshops, which is a phenomenal thing. So hearing that you took another TED Fellows talk, and applied it to something else. I mean, he's working with hardware. He's working with metal, gears, and hardware stuff. And you are working with nature and forest. And it's amazing that the same model is thriving in a way. Your thing is well, his open source hardware is thriving as well. I think he's gearing up right now even faster. But it's amazing that you applied the same thing and it worked so well for you. Do you remember that moment where you decided to is that you probably said something like, all right, let's give it a try. But what was the thinking behind it? Take me through that story, how you decided to go open source with your company and the technology behind starting your own forest.
Oh man, it's very funny actually. So in the second year of we running the business, I just did one project in the second year. First year we got 6 projects, maybe beginner's luck. It was I felt like we made it. We were already in discussions with a very large IT company in India, and it was almost $1 million project. So I started feeling as if we hit the jackpot and whatnot. Eventually, we didn't get the project because those guys said that you are just 6 months old. You don't have a track record. We don't know if you can handle this type of money, and we just got elbowed out by some other landscaping company. Anyways, second year, we were just waiting. No work was coming in, and I started doubting myself whether I'm doing the right thing or not. And then we get this one project where the client calls me for a meeting to his city. I go for a meeting, and they are so enthusiastic about this work that they just asked me to stay, and I stayed because I had nothing better to do. So we started the project. We were into full-fledged operations. The work is happening on site, and everybody is extremely excited about. And I felt like this was the biggest project of my life. We are planting, I don't know, now I don't remember, I think more than 10,000 trees in one go. So it was great. And this client of ours, old school businessman, drove a Mercedes and spoke a lot, like been there, done that. He, had a factory, had some real estate projects. He invited some of his friends on the day of plantation, where he made me speak about the methodology to everyone, and so that his friends who have come to this plantation ceremony doesn't take away the methodology and replicate it in there, because the other guys are also from real estate, and there's like real estate guys who are also probably competitors. He asked me to, like a day before, he did some preparation. He brought some flour, like wheat flour, mixed it in water, made this white color solution. And we have a step where we dip our saplings in water. The root ball is dipped in water and then planted. So he asked me if I dip our saplings instead of water, if we dip it in this white color, mixture of flour and water, will it be a problem? I said, no, sir, it shouldn't be a problem. This is organic, this is natural. It's not synthetic stuff. So I don't think so it will be a problem. But why do you want to do that? He said, no, nothing, don't worry about it. Next day, in front of his friends, he started to dip these saplings instead of water in that white solution, and just declared that this white solution is the secret sauce why this forest grows so well. And I let it happen, because this is an ongoing project. This is a client who's going to pay you. And I suddenly realized that if I let it happen again and again and again, probably we'll contaminate the methodology in a way that maybe 5 years from now, Dr. Miyawaki gets to know about it. And here that there is some magic potion which makes forests grow so fast. With Miyawaki method, he is going to probably, I don't know. I felt really bad, because I'm using some scientist's name who is honest and open enough to share his methodology openly with us, and now we are contaminating, putting this stupid shield on it so that nobody else steals it away. And I think people think like that, if you have the no, I mean, if you feel that you can steal somebody else's stuff, you also feel that somebody else can steal it from me. So to put an end to it, we decided to, okay, let's take this documentation, put it on our website so that no Tom, Dick, and Harry like this client of ours can declare that water mixed with corn flour makes trees grow so fast. And that was the turning point. That was the point where we wanted to become open source, not because we wanted to help the world and and give away the methodology, no, but just because we don't want to get it contaminated. And I actually got this inspiration from a movie. There, in that movie, this movie is called Samsara, not the new one, the old one. Uh, and there was a line on a stone written in Ladakhi language. In northern India, we speak that language, Ladakhi. On one side of the stone, there was a note written: "How do you preserve a single drop of water?" So this was like the opening, somewhere in the opening scene of the movie. How do you preserve a single drop of water? And in the end, they show the other side of that stone where it's written, "Throw it in the ocean." So that's what I feel open source does. How do you conserve something? You just throw it away in the ocean, and
Wow.
it's everybody's property now. They're gonna take care of it.
I love it. So this is so great. Thank you for sharing that story. I mean, that makes it so, makes it real, makes it, make it, you can connect with it. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love a good success story, or even a story which you had, ups and downs, but you are you're successful with this. And your company is doing consulting. It's open source for those who want to take you for free, consulting when they want to hire you. What else do you guys provide? Do you guys provide just consultation, the how-tos, or do you also have like a product? Do you sell saplings? Do you sell different breeds of trees? Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so we have three more services. One is online training, where we train people online, like on a similar mechanism, podcast. We share our screen and train people. Like we have trained people from really amazing places: South America, Africa, of course, US, and many other small places where physically we don't have the bandwidth to go and work. Uh, then we have, like, my favorite, if you ask, is a service called Forestscaping, where we integrate art, design, and forest. What the outcome is so beautiful. We have sculptures, we have hand carved benches, we have amphitheaters, small water bodies, all inside the forest. So forestscaping is like the the best alternative to landscape that can exist in the world. So what we advocate is, get rid of your manicured landscape, get rid of your manicured lawns, convert it into a forestscape, where you can design the forest in a way that you have a pure experience of bathing inside the forest. When you walk in a forestscape, you inhale the aerosols released by the trees, which have medicinal properties. Like 60% of the medicines in the world come from trees, from the bark, their leaves, roots, whatnot. And when you walk in a forest, all those molecules are available in the air of that forest. So they have a sedative effect. You become calm, peaceful, healthier. You heal yourself. You are also in a beautifully designed place where you can sit, relax, work, listen to water, meditate. And these forestscapes are, designed for use. So it's not like a dense Miyawaki forest where you cannot just walk into it because of its density. This is still dense, but we have given the pathways, we have made the arrangements so that you can totally interact with this forestscape. And that's a contractual services. So this is also premium service. We do in a year maximum 3 to 4 projects of forestscaping. Right now we have 2 running projects. We put the cap there, and we provide the materials, manpower, machinery. We provide this as an end-to-end service with 2 years maintenance. So we get the absolute control when we do forestscaping, and that's where we can actually show our creativity, our execution strength, our quality standards, everything all together in one single place. And the profit margins are also a little higher compared to our consulting and online training services. So yeah, so we have online training, forestscaping, and then we have recently started a service where we sell seedlings as well to the open source practitioners, to the partner companies who are using our methodology but making forests independently. So we say, okay, if you're going to buy from us, we're going to take care of the quality, the selection of right species, the mix, because that's the most difficult part. Rest all is easy, but not everybody has the acumen to make a perfect mix of potential natural vegetation to be planted for afforestation. So when they buy from us, we also take care of the theoretical part of it. Yeah.
Since soil preparation of the soil for this is so critical, and the biome, the ecology of it, do you do you work only with the local resources? So let's say if we wanted to start a lot of high density forest over here in Utah in a place, how does that work with the soil? What has to happen with the soil? Obviously you have to work with the soil that's there, but to add those additional ingredients, take me through the process. How would that work if, let's say, we would invite you over here to Utah and to help out over here? What would be the typical process for you to start to kind of assess what do we have to work with, what has to happen, what do we source in order to make it that viable soil and start the project?
Cool. So, assuming that we have already figured out the list of species of trees for Utah, the next step would be checking the soil. So, in our schools, elementary schools or maybe primary, you would have studied a soil triangle where they show sand, silt, clay on 3 different corners, and different types of soils are a mix of sand, silt, clay. So there are anywhere in the world there are 11 types of soils, basically mixture of sand, silt, clay, and a perfect mixture of sand, silt, clay can be called loam. So it could be loamy sand, it could be sandy silt clay, it could be some other type, pure clay. What we have to do is we have to do a soil texture test when we come to a new site. We dig the soil from surface, make a ball of it, then try to form a tape of it, and by determining the length of the tape, we'll be able to tell the soil type. We also collect a sample from depth of 1 meter, and if possible, maybe depth of 3 meters as well, to see that we have through soil, there are no slabs of stones which can stop the growth of the roots, which can be an obstacle to the growth of the roots. So once we know the type of soil we have some predetermined properties about each type of soil. Like sandy soil will have a great perforation capacity. There won't be any obstacle to water from penetrating into this soil because it's made up of big particles which are loose, and water molecules can seep through these bigger particles of soil. No problem. But it will have a problem with water retention. It cannot hold the water. So we will go around Utah and try to find different types of biomasses which has the property to act as a sponge. Now, I don't know what grows in Utah, but everywhere in nature you will have some biomasses which will help soil retain water. So we will buy that biomass. If we don't find any biomass, we will buy manure, farmyard manure. It could be horse manure. We can go to a dairy farm and buy manure from there, because you also have to understand that microbes are also helping us to retain water. Microbes, if can grow so fast that if there is a huge amount of water falls naturally as rainfall, microbes are going to multiply. Overnight, they are going to develop their numbers, they are going to develop their colonies, they are going to develop the size of their body and absorb all that extra water that has come in. So, if not through biomass, maybe using the microbes. So, we'll use manure or some other biomass, make our soil good at water retention. We'll we usually travel with the soil testing kit. So we will test the soil samples for nitrogen and organic matter, organic carbon, because to grow plants need carbon. They trap carbon from air and develop their bodies, becomes wood or leaves. Similarly, initially it's better to have some organic carbon in the soil so that the roots can pull carbon from the soil itself. Uh, so we will test the organic carbon. If it's less, we will mix different types of native biomass, which can be digested by the microbes available in the soil, thus improving the organic carbon in the soil. We're gonna add some more manure to enhance the nitrogen, because initially nitrogen will give a kickstart to our baby forest that we have planted. Eventually, what's going to happen is microbes are going to trap the nitrogen from the air and give it directly to the roots of our trees. So we don't have to be dependent on external supply of nitrogen-rich manure in long run. Basically, these three things: water retention, perforation, and the nutrition or microbes which come in form of compost. The next step after plantation is we cover the soil with a very thick layer of mulch, like 6 inches of mulch, a sheet of mulch, using straw or grass, so that whatever water falls on the ground goes directly into the soil, is conserved for the roots, doesn't evaporate back into the atmosphere, and microbes will thrive under this mulch. So this is how the entire soil preparation process happens.
That's fantastic. I in our little garden over here next to our house, that was one of the things that when we were researching this, and I was talking to some soil experts, and mulch is such a critical element, and especially in Utah, because we get a lot of sun over here, so retaining that water is very difficult, and introducing the mulch, which turns into compost over time, because as it breaks down and deteriorates and just breaks down biologically, it just releases all those nutrients trapped in them, and just kind of feeds the whole biology of the soil, which is just it's an amazing thing. and it's not that expensive, because there's a lot of mulch. There's always trees that are being taken down and they mulch them in, and so it's fairly cheap resource to do this. So you got me excited about growing a forest.
You must. Everybody should. And I think humans as a species, we evolved in a forest. The essentials of a quality human life: clean water, fresh air, healthy nutritious food, medicine, they all come from the trees without we providing them any input. So where would an effortless civilization evolve? It will evolve close to a forest, because you have the water, food, shelter, uh, medicine, and the protection which a forest provides you. Because we are naturally, for millions of years we evolved, for thousands of years, like not very long ago we were in forest. Maybe if we try to find our ancestry, maybe just 15 generations ago, we would be running around or be very close to a forest. Even if we were living in a village, the village would have been extremely close to the forest. Now, because we are designed we are evolved as a animal to live close to a forest or inside a forest, this natural connection just revives the moment you are exposed to your natural habitat. The moment you take a walk in a forest, you suddenly become even a better human being. You feel alive, you feel healthy, you feel less stressed. Because I mean, we didn't evolve as human beings in the concrete apartments we are living in the subway systems we spend so much time in our cars, on the tar roads. That's not our natural habitat, and that's why just the idea of sleeping in a forest, sleeping on a hammock in the forest, is so exciting and so just thinking about is so soothing. When you make a forest in your backyard, you are there in this modern connected world, but at the same time you are also exposed to the natural habitat in which our genes have evolved to this day. And that is so powerful that you change the way you wake up, you change the way you sleep, that you change the way you eat, you become less annoyed, you become more calm, peaceful, and it also improves your, like, rather than staring at my TV screen, I will just open the window and keep looking into the forest because it's so dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
My room is in my house on the third floor, so I almost look into the canopy of my forest trees. And I see squirrels just roaming in the canopy. I see birds at the eye level. I see fruits. I have plucked fruits, directly into the canopy. And I think that is the experience which is much better than the tiny escapes we have from our modern reality. Uh, that's why everybody should have a forest. We will have a much healthier, calmer, happier society if we have forests in our backyards and in our public spaces.
I I wonder what is it going to take to for this to catch on in terms of, hey, this is a new thing and everybody's growing a forest in their backyard. What are your predictions for the future? What can be done to get people excited about growing this? Do you have any? Are you working on any projects or I don't know, maybe a documentary or something to kind of get this out and popularize it? Because all it takes is really well packaged, I guess, information that get in such a way that would get people excited about this to actually do it. What are you working on, or what is in your future regarding that?
So I'm working on two, three different projects, but we have a goal of globalizing the whole art of making forests. Um, I'm taking a training from Ashoka called Ashoka Globalizer, and this March we are going to kind of concretize our plan for next year. And one of the plan is to kind of standardize the methodology amongst the people. So we have a shared vision of the peer community of forest makers all over the world. So in April, we are going to a small symposium in Japan with Dr. Miyawaki and forest makers who are using our open source methodology or who would have learned directly from Dr. Miyawaki. All are coming together to create this shared vision. Second thing which I'm going to do is this month, January 2020, I don't know which date, but we are planning to launch our first Kickstarter to make videos of how to make a forest. So the TED Talk was how to grow a forest in your backyard. These videos are going to be a detailed version of every single step. Uh, Watching the video, listening to the narration, one can actually convert their backyards into a forest. So right from how to survey the trees, how to identify the trees of your particular geography, how to select them, how to quantify them, and then how to prepare the soil, how to plant, how to mulch, how to maintain, how to monitor the growth. All those steps will be recorded in video form, and again, it goes on YouTube openly for everybody to use. We're gonna shoot it in India. I'm also planning Belgium, the Netherlands, Japan, and I'm thinking. I mean, if we exceed our target by 50% on the Kickstarter, in United States as well. So we have one project lined up in the US with a partner. If I get enough funds, we'll fly down to the US, record the entire process, make that step-by-step video manual, and release it. So fingers crossed. Let's see how successful the Kickstarter
Well,
goes.
I'm super excited about that, and if you're going to be here in the States and anywhere near Utah, I'd like to meet with you in person and invite you over here to the studio and chat a little bit more, like what progress have you made, and maybe even evaluate some of our soils over here, adding on to the diversity of your database.
Sure, why not? We were in discussions to do something at Powder Mountain in Utah. I don't know
Mm.
how far or close it is from your place, but
I'm not sure, but I would have to find out. But another question that I had for you was the name of your company. I'm curious about how. So it's a forest spelled. Oh, do I have it up here? Yes, AFFORESTT.
yeah.
And I was curious if there is a story behind that as well.
Okay, so there are few stories. The first one is I wanted to make a company just by the name. Should become obvious what we do, what we are focused on, specialize, because I mean I really love being focused. When you start a business, you get so many ideas. We can do this as well, we can do that as well. And we said, no, we'll be a forest making company and we'll make forests only using one particular methodology. And we'll make so obvious tomorrow we don't get it from the original plan, because usually when you don't get business in one stream, you feel like, okay, let me start another stream, and you start something which is totally not your passion. So we called it a forest because it became something. Okay, so our name also tells us what we do. Before a forest came to mind, I was thinking of calling it Corbett, because I come from a place which is very close to a national park called the Jim Corbett National Park. Jim Corbett was a English man who was one of the initial wildlife conservationists, and the Jim Corbett National Park is like maybe 20 miles away from my house, not even 20 miles, less than that. So I have a very deep connection with the name and with the national park. So wanted to name Corbett, and the last two letters of the name Corbett are two T's. So if we convert these T into the kanji character of Japanese, these T's together means woods. So a Japanese person read the name of company, even if they're not reading the English text, just the two, they will get an idea what probably we are doing, because it says woods, small forest, something like that. And it's same in Korean, Chinese. So Korean, Chinese, Japanese, and English people can read them as T, so it becomes a forest. So somewhere, and also as a tribute to the Japanese guru we had, and to establish that connection between the company and the methodology and its origin, it was a good idea. So I called it A Forest. From Corbett we changed it to A Forest. Then I didn't get the domain forest.com, so I added the same T from Corbett, and then I had a friend who was a Japanese teacher, and she told me that 3 means jungle, 2 means woods, or also a tiny forest. So this is the whole. And then immediately it clicked. Maybe we can just replace the T's with the kanji characters, and it became the logo type and also the name.
I
People
love
like it
it.
actually.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. I love when unexpected questions lead to unexpected answers, because I didn't think about it. I just kind of popped in my brain as I was looking at the pictures that you sent me, and I was like, wow, yeah, those last two T's, they kind of look like trees too, and they look like so you pretty much connected everything together. That is just so funny. So in a way, if in a way it came full circle.
Oh yes, and it's so fun, you know. I mean, this is one of the greatest thing, and anybody who's listening, if they are planning to start up or they have already started, I think the most biggest achievement of starting something new is that you create so much. It's not just that I get to create the forest, I get to create the logo, I get to create the proposals, the quotation. It may sound boring, but you learn so much by just doing all these things for the first time in your life, and you have not been trained to do. So you also learn. So you learn, you create, and I think that keeps every entrepreneur moving. You know, the creative
Hmm.
process of like the forestscaping business. There was no need to do that. We were getting enough consulting projects that we didn't have to do forestscaping. But somewhere I just wanted to fit to have a collaboration with artists, and the collaboration with artists led to integrating art design and forest, and we coined this term, you know, forestscaping. And the first thing which I did after having this term, I got the forestscaping.com domain because I didn't want to make the same mistake when we had a forest. So yeah, we got the forestscaping.com. I got a trademark, and now that is picking up. We know that we are going to do very well in the business of forestscaping, and eventually forestscaping is going to be a lot, give us a lot more revenue than the consulting projects of a forest. This year it has already started happening. So something which sounded so fun is also beneficial financially, and you got to, you know, coin a new term and own that name domain. I think it's a great sense of achievement which this works brings.
I love it because it kind of leads you to on um, well, first you're coining a new term, so that's gonna last forever. Then you're creating forests which nearly live forever, definitely longer than we will.
Yeah.
So you have a sense of legacy leaving behind you, um, that everyone can join you on in a way, because they can start their own forest, and you can say, hey, I'm going to plant this forest, it's going to grow, and when I'm gone, this thing is going to continue on. And I think that may be one of the ways we could make this a catchy thing for people to start. Maybe that's what we need to tap in, grow a forest to leave a legacy behind you.
Yes. In fact, in Beirut, we have planted forest in a graveyard. And the architect who has designed that graveyard now is taking half of he's cutting down the half of the stone slab which goes on the grave. And in traditionally in Lebanon, they usually plant a tree on the grave. So he's saying instead of tree, we will just plant 1 square meter of forest on the grave, and eventually, you know, it will look like a jungle in middle of the city instead of a graveyard. And also it, I mean, philosophically, if you look at it, you are kind of helping, even after you are gone, you are coming back in a way which is not just useful for other human beings, but also for the birds, for the bees. You come back in form of flowers, and I mean, you can write poems about the philosophy of coming back as a tree once you are no more. And I feel that this could be one of the larger shifts which humanity can achieve within the next decade, where we can start to rethink and people who have started rethinking the burial, or in India we burn the bodies. We can actually start a new wave of thinking in how do we leave the planet, leaving that legacy, bringing and making the earth a little better than the day we died. Uh, there are 7 billion people, probably 5 billion of us will have proper burning or conventional burial. If there is a shift, you can imagine billions
Hmm.
of trees can be planted, billions
Billions
of
of trees.
acres, millions of acres can be converted into forests just by having these. So one of our clients, she has started something called memory forest, and you can make a tiny patch of forest in remembrance of your loved ones. So in the very tiny scale of things, it has already started happening. Yes, we need the kind of scale which is which overpowers our religious and spiritual barriers, and open our eyes towards more natural ways of leaving the planet.
What a wonderful thought to when you go, when you pass on, and that this body, this vessel that you'll leave behind becomes a tree, becomes something that continues on this plane over here. Um, Man, this conversation took us into really interesting places, and I really enjoy it because it's an amazing journey for you to do this. And when you started it, um, how did you think is it's gonna, you know, end up, and how did it end up? Like, what did you think is gonna happen, and what has happened?
I thought that my when I started, I used to imagine like 5 years later what position in which we would be. I had a partner at that time, and we used to discuss that maybe 5 years from now we'll be having a forest in Europe. So, I don't know if because of our colonial hangover or why we love Europe so much, but we always feel Europe as an achievement. Like if you have made it to Europe, you have done something. Something great. So we used to think, okay, so within 5 years we have to go international, we have to reach Europe, we have to have a pan India presence, and we have to have a forest in Rajasthan, which is the most difficult part of India to grow a forest. Rajasthan happened in 7 years. Europe, yes, it happened in 5 years. We went international almost at the same time we thought. But something which I had not thought about was the kind of recognition we would get. Recognition from BBC, from magazine, from TED, from Discovery Channel. This was beyond imagination. I mean, for me, it was a purely hard nosed business. And my point of view towards the world was that why would a media platform promote somebody else's business? So I was never expecting news coverage. I was never expecting to be featured in newspapers or TED inviting me to give a talk on their 30th anniversary, like the year 2014 when I spoke for the first time at TED. It was the 30th anniversary, and because it was 30th anniversary, they had called 60 speakers of TED, like from the last 30 years of TED, the best 60 speakers. So I had like the who's and who of the world, as there was Will Smith, there was Bill Gates, there was you like Larry Page, the other owner of Sergey from Google. You had everyone, and suddenly this 20-something guy, 3-year-old with a 3-year-old company, is given that stage to share his idea, thought with all of these. There was Al Gore, who's and who's of the world. And this I found was beyond imagination, beyond expectation. I could have never even asked God to give me something like that, because I didn't have the confidence to think that this would be my area of uh, kind of going in that circle. And I mean, I couldn't open my mouth to even speak about the work which we did uh, to prospective clients. I was so shy of going to all these meetings that I would go and I would say that I work at a forest as a manager or something, and I would just call my friends, ask like my friend's mother name, that she is the owner of the company. I was so shy that I won't even tell that I started this company and I am the founder. And that eventually I realized that you cannot lie and think of that was so detrimental to our growth. We lost one project because the client was very unhappy that still the owners of your company have not come and met me. Like shit, I should have told him the truth in the very beginning. But that's human tendency. We lie without thinking, and then I realized, okay, if you really want to excel in this business or in life, you stop using these petty lies for your convenience. Yeah. So this was unexpected. The kind of the acceptance in the world which we got, especially in masses, was totally something which we never expected. Today we have clients who are spiritual leaders, spiritual organizations, religious organizations. We are working with Sikhs, we are working with the Muslims, we are working in that graveyard in Beirut. This is beyond imagination. I could have never imagined that this could be our clientele. My imagination of clientele was corporate parks, high-end hotels and resorts, independent houses, villas, townships. But this is extraordinary. Samsonite, the luggage suitcase making company, is one of our clients. A salt making company is one of our clients. Very weird. It's we have planted forest in a mosque, in the in cemetery, on road dividers. I mean, in corporate headquarters, at an airport, the airport of the city where I live in, Bangalore. We have a forest at the airport of our city. So whenever I land or take off, I see it from above. I see it from the road. I've taken so many people, like the VIPs who don't have any time. We have taken them to show these forests because it's right there at the airport. Now, I couldn't even have imagined to have this kind of marketing tool, that you have a prototype bang at the airport at one of the most expensive properties in the world. And we got paid to make that. Unimaginable. So this was beyond imagination and expectation.
That is so. I mean, that is just so inspirational. That is just so motivational. And when you have something that's worth doing, it kind of goes along with Ted's motto: "Ideas worth spreading." Yours is ideas worth implementing forests and growing forests, and because it's just, I mean, so you tapped into, I think in part, the success that you achieved is because you tapped into our deep connection with forest. I mean, people, like you said it yourself, like people go to forest to rest. You go over there, you smell it. After the storm, you're there, and it's what relaxes you, right? It's like deeply genetically somewhere stored in our bodies, in our nooks and crannies in our DNA, that this is nature, and that's where we go to rest. And so it boggles my mind that we don't spend more time to try to surround ourselves with a forest. And maybe because people don't know that it's so possible. So now you are a living example of someone who made it a successful business venture and a open source project. that is just literally changing the face of Earth. So now it's just a matter of how do we popularize it more so people get on board of doing this. And there's really almost like no excuse because it's open source. So if you want to do it for free, there you go, do it for free. So it's amazing. It's amazing. I think a documentary, catchy documentary with all the context that you made at TED. I think that's such a no-brainer to go after that, to lean on some of the connections that you made with those high power, those powerful people, successful people in the business, and making documentaries so that people gets their blood boiling and rolling and getting interested in actually doing something, taking some action in their own backyard.
Yeah, I mean, it will happen. We have, again, it becomes a thing of focus. Right now, we are so focused on doing the work on ground. And one of the goals I have is to take our work to more and more geographies. So, and I mean, what excites me is to go to all these new geographies and plant these forests. We are developing a map of all the forests we have made in the world, and we wanted to get kind of saturated with so many dots of forests everywhere. So yes, that's what my focus is. We can actually make a documentary, but the thing is, I just wait for others to do it for us. So Discovery Channel did a documentary on us. It went on air, and the production quality was really high. They spent a lot of money on it. TED is also a similar example. They spent a lot of money in training and time and effort in training, how to give a talk, and the production quality and everything. So I feel, yes, we are the best forest makers in the world, but maybe not the best documentary makers, and that's where we need to have
Collaborate.
better collaboration.
Yeah,
CBS,
collaborate.
I think CBS is going to do another documentary for us now. You never know what hits where. Like, we just have to keep doing it. Let's see. But if I get an opportunity, yes, definitely I would go to TED again with a camera and just talk to all these people and take their opinion and show it to the world. But this is what all the big brains are thinking about these forests, so why not?
Phenomenal. It's amazing. This is amazing. And if you want a challenge, come to Utah and let's plant a forest together over here. Anytime.
Yes, definitely. So that project, I don't know if it's still in the pipeline, but we had a very detailed discussion with somebody making a forest at Powder Mountain.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. I mean, we could go on, but this is an endless topic, and I'm just so grateful that you chose to spend the time with me to talk about this, reveal a little bit more behind how this all started. Hopefully, I know this is going to inspire people who will be listening to this, because this is an amazing story and a worthwhile story to talk about and to spread with others, so that they get excited about it. And let's change the face of the earth with trees. Let's plant more trees. Let's save this planet one tree at a time. And it's such a noble thing to do. I wish you, I don't think you need luck. I think you already did so well. This is just going to be a matter of like perpetuating and going on and continuing on. So, but I wish you luck in collaborating, making this so successful in the sense of virally getting people to start growing forests in their backyards. I think that would be a phenomenal thing to say, like, hey, you see that blue planet? Now it's more green because more forests.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Is there anything that you want to say to anyone? Any final message? Sort of like give a shout out to someone. or just part with a message to anyone?
Well, the message is very simple and clear that anywhere you see a barren patch of land, do imagine that it can be a dense natural forest, and you can convert that barren patch of land into forest. So don't wait for the miracle to happen on its own. The power of converting a barren patch of land into a forest is in your hands. And we have to get it done. There is no other way. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thank you, Shubhendu. Appreciate it. And I'll be in touch with you. I'd love to continue this topic. Bye.
Take care. Bye.
Bye. The world is full of interesting people with wisdom and extraordinary experiences to learn from. Join me on a journey to discover them, speak with them, and learn from them. I'm Adrian Sinclair, host of A Podcast with Interesting